And with me now has been Maimon, Managing Director at KCPS Clarity, to inform us about the HSBC scandal and its wider meaning. Ben, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me again.
So, just to brief us, what's happened since we've all heard about the HSBC scandal?
Well, to remind everyone, you heard last week that a list of 100,000 accounts were leaked from HSBC. Israel was number 6 of 200 countries that had account holders, 65 account holders with a total of about $10 billion. Actually, since then, today there was follow-on news that in the aftermath of that leak, that the authorities in Switzerland have searched the HSBC Geneva office in connection with anti-money laundering. I guess I would just make a couple points with respect to last week's news, and that are that, one, a lot of these, presumably many of those account holders are not Israeli residents. Many of the accounts have been closed because it was really the pre-date 2005, and presumably also many of them have already been disclosed to the authorities.
And do you feel this is a valid argument if they're not residents of Israel? Because this was a big scandal in Israel throughout the past week or so.
Right. I mean, frankly, I don't. If you're not as opposed to the United States, where generally U.S. persons have to report on all of their global assets and income, in Israel, if you're not an Israeli resident, you don't have to report your income or really do any such reporting.
And this process, though, of disclosing accounts, or rather not disclosing accounts, the process against this practice has been going on for some time.
Yes, well, I'd say the recent attention to this, for ages, I think foreign governments have been trying to bring as many of the assets and increase tax compliance. But I think the most recent attention has started in 2010. The United States launched what was called a FATCA, it's broadly known as FATCA. It's a Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, whereby foreign financial institutions are required to report on U.S. tax use person account holders. It's been, and that's really starting this year. There are severe consequences for foreign banks or funds that don't make those announcements. Then, frankly, that sort of started a chain reaction, and the OECD now has come out with their own version of FATCA, where, in addition to the 100 countries that have intergovernmental agreements with the United States, over 50 countries have already voiced their support for the OECD program.
And you began to tell us just a little bit about accounts that don't make these announcements. Can you tell us about the implications of these new regulations for major account holders?
Right. I mean, yes, the consequences can be dire in terms of including prison time. So what I would say is, one of the interesting things in last week's article is that they noted that though the Israeli government's trying to get their hands on the list of Israelis that were in last week's leak, in fact, they have lists of other Israelis that have foreign accounts. And in recent months, 632 Israelis have been arrested in conjunction with holding, I think it's about $10 billion worth of foreign account balances. But I would say that Israel, as well as the United States, they've all been making efforts in the last number of years to encourage people to come forward and have special programs. They're called voluntary disclosure programs, where people are given, reduced penalties, or or to be able to, not have criminal charges pressed against them, and really trying to encourage disclosure. But I would say that window is closing. As the information gets shared, you'd really have to come forward before they come to see you. And so I'd say the window is closing.
Well, Ben Maimon, thank you very much for these hugely interesting insights. Thank you for coming to us today.
Pleasure. Thank you.